Hi, guys, we are here. This is the official episode one of Don't Make Me Go Get My Sister. I feel like honestly today is going to be heavy, um, but I feel like it's really needed and it'll set the tone of how this podcast is going to flow, also of who I am in totality and in transparency, and to attract and do what it needs to do for the people that need to be here because I know I'm not alone. But in today's episode, I don't know about any of you guys, but I am in a season of healing. Um, and if you guys have ever been in a season of healing or dealt with any type of surgery or any type of wound, you know that healing can be ugly, right? So this is definitely my ugly season. But what I do know is that these ashes are going to turn to beauty. Like it got to. But it's so crazy because in this season of healing, it's really not just about this season. I feel it. I feel like it's about really my whole life. Like all the things that I have hoided up inside of me that have been very painful that I thought I forgave or asked for forgiveness or healed through, which I really didn't. I kind of just stuffed it under a blanket, swept it under a rug, put it in a closet. And in my mind, I thought that I was healing because I came up with my own devices to protect myself or to get me through those phases of my life. And I'm learning now that I didn't heal. If anything, I infected the wound or irritated the wound and made it worse. And I feel like that's what Satan does. I had an epiphany a few years ago. Yes, it is very traumatic and demonic and diabolical when we hear like people's lives being suddenly taken from them. I'm not trying to take away from that, but ultimately, if the enemy can use you for the long haul, like that's what he get excited about because it's more damage, right? You're affecting more generations, you're affecting more people. So if he can slowly kill you with something that's undetectable, that is like chef's kiss for him. And we don't realize that he does that a lot with us, and a lot of it comes from our unhealed trauma or things that offended us and hurted us that we don't really deal with. So, anyway, I'm going to get into it. I know for me, I've touched on it lightly about how, growing up, like I dealt with like a lot of hurt. And one of those, hurt and pain came from abandonment, abuse, rejection, manipulation, like all those things, right? And I know we all experienced that, but for me, for say, mine was in the way of me being sexually abused by my stepfather and how the people around me didn't protect me, um, and chose, in some sense, if I have to be honest and transparency, of dismissing it or turning their eye to it for whatever reason, right? Because I'm not inside of their head. Also, with the fact that my biological father, wasn't there for me. And me being sexually abused by my stepfather and then dealing with the abandonment and the rejection of my father. And I'm pretty sure, right, this is not to like accuse or offend anybody. This is my truth. So if they want to get on the podcast and do their truth, I welcome it. Like we all need to be healed. So this is not about accusing people or anything. This is just about my transparency and my truth of my life. Um, but however they want to perceive it, that's how it affected me. For whatever reason, why, that's how it affected me. For my mom, still being married to my stepfather, and the way she handled the situation with my stepfather and me being abused, that also wounded with me. With my stepmother, she was very mean. I could say a lot of things verbally growing up, or just very manipulative in her actions. If I'm just being very transparent, all of those things wounded me, even down to how it affected me, how I interacted with my siblings. Like, that was hurt and pain. And by no means am I saying I'm innocent, because I was a piece of work growing up. I definitely was a piece of work. I was a very angry child. Um, but I also was a very people pleasing child, which is also even worse because of the different things that I dealt with. So none of these things were good at all. And then I also ran to my own devices to cope with it, whether it was boyfriends or toxic friends, or trying to dibble and dabble with, weed or alcohol or partying or just whatever it was, isolation, like all of these things that I went into to try to heal myself. I did. Me becoming very mean um, towards people, um, me just, hurting people before they hurt me. Like, all of those things I resorted to as a way to self protect, even with putting myself in situations that were very compromising to myself to try to fit in, just to feel some type of normalcy and love. Like, I've been through all of those things to try to deal with the root of what was wrong with me, and that was trauma. That was the enemy. Um, that was, things that were created to steal, kill, and destroy me. And as I'm going through this healing part in my life, right, I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, I got to a place where I was like upset with God. And I was just like, you being God and all that you are, like, I'm upset with you too, because I feel like you didn't protect me. I feel like, you didn't take care of me. Um, like, what is happening here? Like, who looked out for that little girl who couldn't look out for herself? Like, you're God, you can do anything. Why did you allow these things to happen? And as I'm going through this and going through my healing season and sitting with God and getting to know Him, right? Because He made it very clear to me 3 years ago when I gave Him my yes that it was about a relationship. And what we fail to realize is that in relationships, we have to be confronters. And we're going to confront some things that are very uncomfortable. We're going to ask some questions that sometimes we don't want to hear the answer to, but it has to be done. Like, God created His children to be confronters, not to be punks or people that just run away or just ignore or allow things to happen. Like, no, we got to confront. And a lot of people don't like that because it's offensive, but it is what it is. So, me sitting with God and bringing this to His attention, first of all, He allowed me to see that He gives us all a free will. Even the people that do wrong to us, they have a chance to do right. And with sin being in the world, a lot of times people give into their self and their selfishness over someone else, regardless of what they're dealing with. We all know it, like, hurting people hurt people. And I'm still processing that. And I learned so much in processing that, and how our parents' decision affects our decisions, and so on and so forth with their parents. But I remember the other day I was sitting in my car and I was praying and I was reading in the Bible. And the Lord says to me, "You're going to war with Moab." And I'm like, whoa, what does that mean? So, me being who I am, I looked up what Moab meant, and Moab meant from the Father. And it wasn't from the Father above, but it was from the Father. It was from Lot, his daughter, doing something very detestable, basically taking advantage of her father, which created the baby, which was Moab. So that was born out of sin and incest. And it created a whole lineage of people that now were at war with God. And literally, it's just like one of those moments, like, that's what happens to us. Our forefathers, our ancestors indulge in things that affect the next generation going forward. And it's like, how do we get away from that? And the only way we do is going to war with it, without giving into what affect us, because we might do it differently. And that's see where the whole thing comes with being accusatory, and where Satan starts getting real crafty and slick, right? Because you'll be like, well, I didn't hurt them how they hurt me, but in some type of way, you still hurt somebody, or you still wounded somebody. It might be different, or it might be done a different way, but the root of it is it's because you were hurt, and we live by what we know. We live by what we experience unless we change it. And that right there blew me away. And then I was studying David. When David was in the wilderness, when he was running away from Saul, he was in a place of isolation and hurt. And he grew up in a place of isolation and hurt, because we see in the Bible that he was rejected. Like, he wasn't even considered, okay? He wasn't even considered when the prophet came to anoint a king from his father's house. They didn't even include David. And then now, as soon as he was anointed, he was basically hidden in plain sight, because the very person that God was saying that he was going to replace, he was set under to be trained. And I'm getting somewhere, y'all, so just walk with me. So me studying that, right? Once David was anointed, and then Saul starts seeing in him without David saying who he was, because people see in you before you can even say who they was, he became a direct enemy to Saul. And then David out in the wilderness, him being out in the wilderness and him being in a place of isolation, he tries to fit in with his enemies because he didn't have nothing else. So he tried to blend in what he knew and in spaces that he knew he wasn't supposed to be in. So he started hanging out with the Philistines. And to the point that the king started liking him. And then he started robbing people. And the king was like, well, where are you getting all of this stuff from? And David didn't want to tell him, like, look, I'm robbing y'all, and like, and you know what I mean, and and you know what I mean, like, I'm robbing y'all, but he didn't want to tell them that. So he was like, I'm robbing the children of Israel. So the king all hyped because, they were against the children of Israel. They like, yo, you can't never go home. Like, dang, you turned on God like that. Like, you robbing your own people. But he really was robbing them. And to cover it up, he was killing everybody because he couldn't leave nobody alive. So he was killing everybody. So then once he get advanced and taken into the palace, and the thing about that is that I know that my life, like the season that I'm in now, like God is up on the back of my neck. Like, I can't do nothing wrong. I can't resort to my own, devices, the things that I used to do. And I'm like, yo, used to give me so much grace. Like, I was your girl. Like, I felt like God favorite. All y'all wearing those little shirts or whatever, like God favorite. Y'all think y'all getting away with all y'all don't know. No. It's going to catch up with you, and you don't realize that what you're doing is infusing bad habits into yourself that you're going to have to go back later and dig up those seeds. But anyway, God allowed it through that season. God grace covered him in that season of what he was doing, because it was a thin line with it, because he was in the wilderness and he was surviving in that place. But he also, even though it was being done in a very manipulative way, he was taking out the enemy. And it reminds me kind of even with John the Baptist, right? Because it says John the Baptist was in the wilderness. And the very thing that was supposed to consume and kill him, he ate, which was locusts. We all love that scripture that, with the cankerworm, the locust, and the palmer worm ate away, God going to restore. Because those things eat away in a group at things in our life at a fast pace. But the very thing that was supposed to do that to John the Baptist, he ate that. The very thing that he had on his body that should have gave him a lot of pain, he was moving in that thing to the point they were like, yo, he crazy. Like, and I'm looking at that season of David's life, God let what should have consumed him, David consume. And that was grace. So now David gets into the palace, and he was actually in a place that he should not have been, because when we read about the whole story with him and Bathsheba, it started off saying that he was supposed to be away at war because kings were supposed to be at war at that time, but he wasn't. He was in his bed for whatever reason. He was in a low place for whatever reason. So then he goes on his roof and he look afar and he's seeing like this beautiful woman, butt naked. He didn't even have to take it the next step, but then he tell his people like, yo, like, who's Shorty? Like, go get her and bring her to me. And then he takes it even further and then he has sex with her and then he sent her away. Then she sent word to him and basically like, I'm pregnant. And he's trying to devise a way to cover it up. So he started resorting back to his old ways when he was in the wilderness. A place that God allowed for survival with his grace. He resorted back to that place and tried to bring it now in a place of him walking in purpose. And me reading these, it's like blowing my mind, because a lot of times we want to bring what God allowed for us to survive in the wilderness to the place of purpose and in the palace. And we cannot. And after he seen that the manipulation and things wasn't working, all the game that he was running on the Philistines and the kings or whatever to survive, that didn't work with Uriah, because Uriah was 10 toes down the soldier. He resorted back to his old way. He was like, I got to kill him to cover up. I got to kill him to cover up what's going on. And when he did that and he shed innocent blood, that's when we see things really, really get hectic in his house. And I'm going somewhere, y'all. Going at war with Moab, going at war with what is against God hit his house. And the crazy part about it is that as anointed as David was, as close to God as David was, as being God's favorite as David was, and this is how crazy it was in his mind when he got to that high place. Like, you know what I mean? I'm God's favorite. I'm God anointed. Because God allowed it with his grace in that season. And even before it even got to the point where the prophet came to him, he could have repented before he even tried to, like, you know, manipulate Uriah, before he even tried to kill him and did kill him. He could have immediately fell down on his knees and been like, God, I sinned it. I fornicated. I took this woman. I got her pregnant. How do you want me to go about this? See, we don't do that. He could have been like, how you want me to handle this situation? But he went to his own devices instead of even seeking God before it even got to the point where now God got to send a prophet to him. And a prophet came to him basically real smooth. Like, you know what I mean? It was this guy, it was this king, and he had everything. And then it was this person, and he only had one thing. And then the king took the one person thing, and, you know what I mean, telling David, and David getting mad, like, he should die. And then he flipped it back around him and like, yeah, it's you. And then now they be like, oh my gosh, like, no. And then, like, you know, that's where we see that sign where he go into the place that created me a clean heart. And then because of that, the baby ended up dying. But he fasted. He stayed on his face and prayed for that baby to live. But there, you know, a consequence of him doing that baby died. And the other part of that is that he was told that the sword wouldn't leave his house. That right part, that's the part right there. Because that makes us back where we're going at Moab. So for me being sexually abused growing up, me enduring so many different things going up, I don't know what somebody in my family did as far as an agreement through my bloodline that now this fell upon me. A decision that somebody made that opened up the door in such a way that sin came in that it hit me. And it wasn't just me. It's other people in my family that has been affected to me, but I only can speak for myself. But literally after that, what happened? David's daughter was raped by her brother. All hell broke out in his life. And literally the sword was in his home. And that put me at a place with God to understand that God never wants these things to happen. But my decision that I make, the decisions that I make with my business, with myself, with my marriage, with how I treat other people, affect my children. No matter how much we think that we're a good parent, no matter how much we buy our kids things, no matter how much we want to hug and kiss them, or sometimes don't, okay? Because sometimes you're in a place full of so much hurt you don't even give your children affection. The decisions that we make, it affects the next generation, and we have to be so conscious of the decisions that we're making. And even in the moment of sin, even in the moment of hurt, even in the moment of adversity, before we resort back to how we survived in the wilderness, before we resort back to how we handle heartbreak in high school, before we resort back to how we handle our first baby dad, before we resort back to how we handle our first fight, we need to consult God. First of all, we need to ask for forgiveness for all of those things that we did. And we need to forgive what was done to us. But moving forward, it's so important that we ask God, what do I do right now? And I'm not going to sit here and act like I got it all together, because I definitely struggle. Because when things happen, I'm so used to being reactive. I'm so used to responding through my emotion. I'm so used to being my own protector that I automatically go in defense mode, where I feel like I got to take you out before you even think about taking me out. Like, I am fighting through these things. I am fasting through these things. I am praying through these things. I am contending for my life to make sure that I move differently now that I know God is elevating me to a place of purpose. Now that I know God is elevating me to the things that he told me that I was a child that I was going to do, I have to move differently. Yes, God grace covered me in the past, and I thank God for it. But now that I'm in this place, it's so important for me, for myself, that I personally, for me, I have to move different. I cannot act how I acted in the wilderness with things that are going on right in my life, even though I feel like people are playing in my face, people are hurting me. You know, it's not aligning with the vision and a prophecy that God told me that I would have. But the more and more I study my Bible, like, when did what we see ever align with what God was doing? One of the scriptures that really stuck out to me today when I was asking God, like, what do he want me to talk about today in reference to my life and the things that I've been through, all the pain that I endured, you know, through my childhood trauma, through navigating through life, you know, me hurting other people, through my business, through my marriage, through friendships, all these different spaces in my life. Because first of all, I don't even be feeling worthy, because first of all, I feel like I definitely don't even got it all together. So I'm like, who this for? Because, like, I need help. Hosanna, help me. um, but you want me to tell my sisters, like, don't be afraid to get your sister. And the reason why is because, first of all, we need community. We need each other. We need to know that we're not alone. The devil loves to keep us in a place of isolation, or places that are speaking to our flesh and not to our spirit. But in me asking God, what do you want me to say today? Because I had a rough and emotional day pretty much today. Like, I feel like all my life I've been fighting. But he brought up the scripture in Genesis with Joseph, another person that we can see the same thing that I was talking about with David, we see with Joseph throughout his life. Like, Joseph ain't asked for that. I know Joseph, as so many times in his life, was like, who this for? Joseph just got excited about a vision that God gave him and shared it with his brothers. And they didn't, like, plotted to, they was going to kill him, but if it wasn't for one of the brothers, but then just pretty much just sold him into slavery, put him in, did all types of stuff, right? Joseph was like, who is this for? But I love Joseph's heart posture, that when things came full circle for him. And sometimes things don't always come full circle right away, and sometimes they do. But I love that in Genesis 50:20 is one of my anchor scripture, because Joseph said, you know, his brothers at this point was like, you know, we're afraid to even talk to Joseph, or even if he's going to help us, or how he's even going to receive us, because what we did to him. And Joseph says, even though you intended it to hurt me, God intended it for my good. It was his plan all along to ensure the survival of many people. So don't worry. I myself will provide for you all that you need, both for you and your little ones. And then, with more kind reassurance, Joseph's words comforted his brothers. And honestly, that's what it's really all about. Every chapter in the Bible always, in some type of way, is reflecting to us the prophecy of who Christ was when he walked on this earth. Because even though people hurt us, it's always going to work out for our good. And it's so important how we walk in that hurt. Because the very people that hurt us always are going to need us, but it's not for us to stun on them, but it's for us to love them in spite of how they treated us. It's for us to sow into them and give to them. And again, I struggle with this because the very people that hurt me have come to me for help and asked me for help. And I struggle with it. But I know in this season I can't. I have to constantly forgive. I have to constantly ask for forgiveness. I have to constantly love and go to people and bare my heart in transparency and apologize to them for things I've done to them, and also just sit while they express that the seeds of what my hurt sown into them, they feel justified to do to me, and I got to just eat it because I'm in a place of humility of I don't want to keep this cycle going. Somebody got to break it. And that's literally what we see Joseph doing. Like, he's breaking that cycle because he could have easily stunned on his brothers, but he broke the cycle by saying, look, it was good to me that you did that to me, because if you didn't sell me into slavery, I wouldn't have made it to Egypt. I wouldn't have went to prison. I wouldn't have went to the king palace. I wouldn't have went to prison. I wouldn't have made it to this place where now I can feed my nation, where I can take care of my family. And even though in my life, I went through all that I went through, I was sexually abused, I was physically abused, I was emotionally abused, I was mentally abused, I was abused in so many different ways. I didn't even graduate high school, but God still used me to create a business, to generate millions of dollars. God still used me to walk in love. God still used me, and I'm not worthy of any of those things, but if I didn't go through what I went through, I wouldn't be who I am and who I am becoming. So it was good for me that I was afflicted. And we have to start looking at things from that perspective instead of being in the victim mentality and always walking in defense. We got to start looking at, even though things hurt us, offended us, and wore us completely out, it made us a better person, not a monster, because it can go two ways. We always have the choice. You can become what hurt you, or you can kill it. You can become the bigger monster, or you can kill the monster. We have that choice. And I thank God that he put his love in my heart to help me turn away from becoming a bigger monster, because at some points in my life I was that. But I thank you from him encountering me and giving me a repentant heart that now I can walk away from that place and walk in the other direction. Because it's not worth it to allow pain and hatred to consume us, to turn us into monsters that destroy our family, that destroy our children, all because we don't want to submit to God and repent and take accountability. It's not worth it. And it don't feel good to be snatched. I know we be singing songs. One of my favorite songs is by Chandler, where he be talking about how God leaves the 99 for the one, and he be like, I'm so glad he snatched me. Yeah, I be singing that song and I be bumping and it's exciting, but when I got snatched, it didn't feel good. I don't know nobody that ever got snatched that got felt good. Even when I got snatched up as a kid for doing something wrong, it don't feel good. But what it saved me from is what I can rejoice from. You snatching me so I didn't touch the stove. You snatching me so I didn't get hit by a car. You snatching me so, you know what I mean, I didn't just do something so destructive that the sword never leaves my house. Like, that part I can rejoice for. And because of who Christ is, like, he snatched me. And I can rejoice for that. Like, we have that now. The Old Testament ain't have that, but we got that now. So walking into this podcast with me, walking through spaces of my life, I'm going to show y'all the good, the bad, and the ugly to Shaun. I'm going to show y'all how my actions caused me to hurt other people, but how the love and grace of God also have saved me. Because I was disrespectful to my parents. I was disrespectful to my stepfather. I was disrespectful to my stepmom. I was disrespectful to my mom and my dad. And it doesn't matter what people do to you. It's about how you respond to it. Because at the end of the day, when I go before God, when I go before Jesus, I can't go there and be like, well, I smacked this person, or I did this, or I cursed them and I did that, or I withheld my hand with help from them because of what they did to me. No, I'm accountable. God never is going to um, reprimand us for what people do to us. He reprimands us to how we respond to it. And that's the important part. So we have to stop responding to our pain through our pain. And we got to start sitting in a place long enough, no matter how long it takes, for God to heal us so that we can respond from a place of love and forgiveness, so that we can save the next generation. Because God is showing me that we're going into a season of generational blessings. I can feel it, because ain't everybody going through it. And we're not going through all of this for ourselves, but it's for the next person. It's for the next generation, so that we can save them. And how do we save them? By not becoming what was supposed to consume us, by eating what was supposed to destroy us. What I love about Moses is that he ran away. He was trying to run away from the sin and what he did and his trauma, but God still met him there. And what I love is that through his curiosity, right? Him being nosy and being curious, looking at that burning bush, led him into a place of long-term relationship and marriage with God. He was curious, so he went to go check it out, and ended up being in a place of holy land that turned into a place of consummation. All right. He got consumed and impregnated with God, which resulted into him going into a covenant with God, my God, and God walking with him through the very things that were supposed to destroy him and his nation. God sent him back to bring them out. Never leaving nor forsaking him, being there with him the whole way through. And that's really what it is all about. Surrender, relationship, marriage, and learning how to be married first to God, walking away from what has hurt us, what has tried to destroy us, and becoming the very pillars and altar to consume and destroy that. That's what God created us to do. That's why he said greater we will do. Because the very things that was meant to kill us, destroy us, and destroy our bloodlines, he's raising up right now in this time. People that are going to eat it like John the Baptist did. What was supposed to consume him, he ate it for dinner. What was supposed to tear the skin off of his back, he wore it like a garment of praise. And that's exactly the place where I am in, and I'm contending to stay in. And I know I'm speaking to somebody else. Don't move, don't get weary, because baby, you eating it. Don't let nobody lie to you. You eating it, and keep on eating it. And when you feel like you can't go on, don't forget to come get your sister.